Apache child, then met her widow mother.
The sun was already sinking low when Daniel finished his work for the day. The desert air was calm, carrying a quiet stillness that always came before nightfall.
Breaths. Daniel lived alone in a small house on the edge of a southwestern town, where the road slowly faded into open land. His life was simple and routine. He worked, came home, cooked modest meals, and spent his evenings in silence. It was not a sad life, but it was a lonely one, shaped by years of keeping to himself after losing people he once loved. That evening, Daniel decided to take the longer road home. It was a habit he had picked up when he needed time to think. As he drove, his headlights swept across empty land, broken only by rocks, dry bushes, and the distant outline of hills. Then, near a small roadside rest area that few people used anymore, he noticed something unusual. At first, he thought it was an animal standing near the road. He slowed down. As the car moved closer, he realized it was a child. She stood still, frozen, as if unsure whether to run or stay. Bad, she was small, thin, and wearing clothes that were dusty and worn. Her hair was tangled, and her face showed fear mixed with exhaustion. Daniel stopped the car immediately and stepped out slowly, careful not to frighten her. He spoke gently, asking if she was okay. The girl did not answer right away. She clutched her hands together and looked down, avoiding his eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. She said her name, but nothing more. But Daniel felt a deep concern rise in his chest. A child should not be alone in a place like this, especially as night was coming. He asked where her parents were. She shook her head. He asked if she was lost. She nodded slightly, but said nothing else. First, he knew the right thing to do was to contact the authorities. He called for help and waited with the girl, offering her water from his car. She accepted it cautiously. She drank slowly, like someone who had not had enough in a long time. When the police arrived, they asked her questions, but she remained mostly silent.
Whew. They took her to a nearby station, and Daniel followed behind. He could not explain why, but he felt responsible for her now.
Beth's, something about her quiet strength and fear reminded him of loss he thought he had buried. At the station, social workers tried to gather information. The girl only shared her first name. She spoke simple words, sometimes mixing in words from her native language. It became clear she was Apache. No missing child reports matched her description. No one had come looking for her. Because Daniel was the one who found her and because he lived nearby. The social worker asked if he would be willing to let her stay with him temporarily while they continued their search. It would only be for a short time, they said. Daniel hesitated. He had never cared for a child before. His house was quiet, built for one person. But when he looked at the girl sitting alone in the chair, her feet not even touching the floor, he felt something he had not felt in years. A sense of purpose.
He agreed.
That first night was awkward and tense. Daniel prepared a simple meal, unsure what she liked. She ate quietly, watching him carefully, as if measuring whether she was safe. He showed her the small bedroom that used to store boxes and old memories. He cleaned it quickly, making space just for her. She slept with the light on. In the days that followed, Daniel learned how careful he needed to be. Loud noises startled her, but sudden movements made her flinch. But she also showed strength. She woke up early, folded her blanket, and tried to help without being asked. Social services continued their search. They contacted nearby communities and tribal offices.
Days turned into weeks. Still, no family came forward.
Daniel slowly adjusted to a life that no longer belonged to him alone. Mornings were no longer quiet. Bus, He learned how to make simple breakfasts and pack lunches. He walked her to school, where she stayed close to him until she grew familiar with the teachers. Brash at home. She began to speak more. She shared small details, memories of walking with her mother, stories of songs she used to hear at night, and images of places that felt far away. But Daniel listened without interrupting, careful not to push her too hard. He knew her culture mattered. He reached out to members of the Apache community nearby, asking how he could support her properly. He learned small things, words, traditions, and customs that helped her feel less alone.
He did not try to replace what she had lost. He only tried to protect what remained.
At night, when the house grew quiet, Daniel sometimes sat alone and wondered how his life had changed so suddenly. He had not planned this.
He had not asked for responsibility, yet it felt more real than anything he had known in years.
The girl began to smile more. She laughed softly at simple jokes. She started calling Daniel by his name instead of staying silent. Trust grew slowly, like something fragile but strong. Still, questions remained. Where had she come from? Who had she lost? Why had no one found her yet? As weeks became months, the social worker returned with updates that were always the same. No new leads. Die. No family. No clear answers. Daniel felt a quiet fear settle in his heart. He knew this arrangement was temporary. One day, someone might come and take her away. He told himself not to grow too attached. But attachment does not ask permission. One evening, as they sat together watching the sky turn dark outside the window, the girl leaned slightly toward him. It was a small movement, almost unnoticed. But to Daniel it meant everything. In that moment, he realized his life would never be the same again. And somewhere beyond the desert, unseen and unheard, a mother was still searching, unaware that her child was alive, safe, and slowly finding a new place to belong. Weeks turned into months, and Daniel's life had changed in ways he had never imagined. The small house that once echoed with silence now had the sound of laughter, footsteps, and quiet murmurs. The girl, who had been so scared and withdrawn when he first found her, began to trust him. She would follow him around the house, mimicking his movements, and occasionally asking questions about the world outside. Every small interaction was a discovery for both of them.
Daniel learned quickly that caring for a child was not simple.
Mornings became busy with getting her ready for school, making breakfast, and trying to coax her to eat more than just a few bites. Some days she would refuse to speak or eat, clinging to the memory of her lost life. On those days, Daniel would sit beside her quietly, offering comfort without forcing words. He realized that patience was more powerful than any argument or scolding.
School was another challenge. She struggled with certain subjects, especially reading and writing, but Daniel refused to let frustration take over.
He would spend evenings with her, helping her practice letters and numbers, using gentle encouragement and small rewards. Slowly, she began to improve. Her teachers noticed the change and commented on her newfound confidence. But even as she adapted to the school environment, Daniel knew that the memories she carried inside were still heavy. There were nights when she would wake up crying, calling out names he did not recognize, names that belonged to a life he could never fully see.
Daniel understood that to truly help her, he needed to understand her culture.
He began reaching out to the local Apache community, asking for advice on how to preserve her identity. Elders welcomed his questions, offering guidance on traditions, songs, and stories. Daniel listened carefully, learning the meaning of each word, the rhythm of each song, and the significance of the stories. He realized that preserving her heritage was just as important as providing her with safety and comfort.
He incorporated small rituals into their daily life. On certain days, He would cook traditional foods, following recipes he had carefully copied from the elders. He learned to pronounce words in her language correctly, practicing until he could say them without hesitation. Sometimes they would sit together by the window, listening to songs from her culture while the wind moved through the desert outside. The girl would hum softly, her eyes lighting up with recognition and joy. Those moments were small victories, reminders that she could still feel connected to her roots despite everything she had lost.
Over time, Daniel noticed changes in himself as well. Caring for her awakened a sense of responsibility he had not felt in years.
He found himself planning for the future, thinking about what would be best for her, not just for the next week or month, but for the years ahead. He began imagining a life where they were together permanently, where he could provide the stability she had been missing. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. The state continued to check on the situation, reminding him that the arrangement was temporary. Social workers would visit, asking questions, reviewing forms, and suggesting alternative placements. Each time, Daniel felt a tight knot form in his stomach. Why? He knew that she belonged somewhere, but he also knew that the bond they had formed was real and important. Every day he spent with her made the idea of separation unbearable. One evening, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a small photo album he had started creating for her. He had taken pictures of her first day of school, her attempts at painting, and quiet moments in the backyard where she watched the sunset. He realized how many memories they had already built together, memories that could not be replaced or forgotten.
He wondered if it was selfish to want her to stay, but deep down he knew he wanted what was best for her, even if that meant fighting for it.
The girl began to speak more about her feelings as well. She would sometimes ask why she had been alone, why no one had come for her, and why her life had changed so suddenly. Daniel would answer as honestly as he could, telling her that some things were beyond anyone's control but that she was safe now. He encouraged her to express herself through drawing, writing, and talking. Slowly, she learned that it was okay to feel sadness, fear, and even anger. Daniel never dismissed her emotions. He listened and validated them. But trust became the foundation of their relationship. One afternoon, Daniel took her to a small creek outside town. The water was clear, and the desert sun reflected off its surface. He showed her how to skip stones and how to recognize different birds and plants. She laughed freely, her laughter ringing out over the water, a sound Daniel had not heard in years. He felt a deep sense of joy mixed with sorrow. Joy because she was beginning to heal. Sorrow because he knew the world outside could still be harsh and unpredictable.
As the months passed, Daniel began to imagine a future where they could be together permanently.
He researched what it would take to adopt her legally. The process was long, filled with paperwork, background checks, and court hearings. Friends and neighbors offered advice, and the Apache community gave guidance, helping him understand the importance of honoring her heritage, even within the legal system. Daniel approached the process with careful thought, understanding that adoption was not just a formality, it was a lifelong commitment. The girl began to sense the seriousness of the situation as well. She asked questions about adoption, about what it meant, and about what would happen if she had to leave. Daniel reassured her gently, explaining that adoption meant they would be a family, and she would always have a home with him. The concept was new and sometimes confusing for her, but she began to understand that love and family could take many forms. At home, life settled into a new rhythm. Mornings were filled with school preparations and quick breakfasts. Afternoons were for homework, play, and small adventures in the desert.
Evenings were quiet, with shared meals and storytelling. Daniel and the girl would read books together, and he would learn about her interests and fears.
They began celebrating small milestones together, from her first successful school project to a day when she managed to climb a small hill near their house without fear. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, was a reason for joy.
Daniel also learned from her in ways he had not expected. Her resilience, creativity, and humor reminded him of the strength of children in the face of adversity.
She had endured so much at a young age, yet she continued to smile in hope. Her perspective on the world was different from his, but it was refreshing and inspiring. He found himself slowing down, noticing small details in the desert, appreciating quiet moments more deeply than he ever had before. Despite the happiness, there were difficult moments, but nights when the girl woke from nightmares, mornings when she refused to eat, and days when the weight of her past seemed too heavy for either of them to bear. Daniel faced each challenge with patience and care, always reminding himself that trust was built over time. He learned that being a parent was not about perfection, but about presence, consistency, and unconditional support. As the seasons changed, so did their relationship. They began to form rituals that were meaningful to both of them. On Fridays, they would cook a special meal together, experimenting with recipes from her culture. On Sundays, they would walk in the hills, talking about dreams, hopes, and fears. Daniel found joy in these moments, feeling a deep sense of connection that he had never experienced before. The girl's laughter and curiosity brought light into his life, and he felt a responsibility to nurture and protect it. One evening, while watching the sunset over the hills, the girl asked Daniel a question that made him pause. "Will I always live with you?" she asked softly. Her eyes were wide and serious, searching for reassurance. Daniel took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes," he said. "You will always have a home with me." The relief in her expression was immediate, and she leaned against him, a quiet gesture of trust and love. Daniel realized then that his life had changed completely. He was no longer just a man living alone. He was a father in every sense of the word. The idea of adoption grew stronger in his mind. Daniel knew it would be a long process, filled with legal steps, evaluations, and waiting periods. But he was ready.
He wanted to give her the stability and security she deserved. He also wanted to honor her culture and identity, ensuring that she never felt disconnected from her heritage.
Daniel understood that adoption was not about possession. It was about commitment, love, and the promise to be there through every step of life. At night, after the girl had fallen asleep, Daniel would sit quietly in the living room, reflecting on how much had changed. He thought about the day he found her alone by the roadside, the fear and uncertainty in her eyes, and how far they had come together. He felt gratitude for the small moments, for her trust, and for the opportunity to provide a home she could truly call her own. He also felt a quiet determination to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that their bond was strong enough to endure them. As the weeks turned into months, Daniel realized that this journey was not just about caring for a child. It was about growth, understanding, and the power of love. He had learned patience, empathy, and the importance of listening. He had discovered joy in small victories and strength in difficult moments. And most importantly, he had learned that family could be chosen, built, and nurtured with intention and care. One morning as they walked to school together, the girl skipped ahead, turning to wave at him with a bright smile. Daniel watched her, feeling a warmth in his chest that he had never known. He knew that no matter what the future held, they had already created something beautiful. A bond built on trust, love, and shared experiences. But in that moment, he understood that life could change in an instant, bringing unexpected joy, responsibility, and the chance to make a difference in someone's world. Daniel also began to dream of the day when adoption would be final. He imagined telling her officially, signing papers that would make them family in every sense. He imagined her reaction, her laughter, and the feeling of certainty that they would face the world together. The thought filled him with hope, and he felt ready to take every step necessary to make that dream a reality. Through every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every instance of fear, Daniel and the girl continued to grow together. Their days were filled with learning, laughter, and discovery. He had found a purpose he had never expected, and she had found safety, love, and belonging. But Together they had begun a journey that would shape both of their lives forever. And as the desert winds blew through the hills, and the sun painted the sky with shades of gold, Daniel understood something profound. Life was unpredictable, but love could transform even the loneliest heart. He had chosen to care, to protect, and to love, and in return he had been given a gift that no loss or hardship could ever take away. Months had passed, and Daniel and the girl had grown inseparable. Their lives had settled into a quiet, comforting rhythm. Mornings were filled with laughter and chatter as they prepared for school. Afternoons were for homework, walks in the hills, or small adventures exploring the desert landscape around their home. Evenings were warm and peaceful, spent reading books or sharing simple meals. Daniel had watched her grow, not just in height, but in confidence, curiosity, and trust. He knew she was beginning to heal from the loneliness and fear she had carried when he first found her. But one morning everything changed. Daniel received a call from the social worker he had grown to trust, Bo. Her voice was calm, but there was a seriousness in her tone that made Daniel sit up straighter. "Danielle," she said, "we've received new information. There's a woman who may be the mother of the girl you've been caring for. She has been searching for her daughter for years." Daniel felt a sudden rush of emotions: surprise, worry, hope, and fear, all at once. He had known that her past was a mystery, that there was a chance her family might appear one day. He had prepared himself for that possibility in theory, but not for this moment, not now when their bond was so strong and their lives so intertwined. He listened carefully as the social worker explained that the mother, an Apache woman named Leela, had faced many challenges. She had lost her husband years ago, and circumstances beyond her control had separated her from her daughter, Narration. She had searched tirelessly, moving from one place to another asking for help and never giving up hope. The authorities had only recently tracked her down and confirmed her identity through old records. Daniel's mind raced. He cared deeply for the girl, and the thought of her mother appearing was both joyful and frightening. He had built a life with her, nurtured her, and loved her. And yet, the possibility of reuniting her with her mother, the person who had never stopped searching for her, was something he could not ignore. He realized that love sometimes meant letting go, or at least sharing. The social worker arranged for a meeting at a small community center near Daniel's home. It would be supervised at first to ensure everyone's safety and comfort. Daniel agreed, feeling a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. He knew that this meeting could change everything. On the day of the meeting, Daniel arrived early with the girl. He held her hand gently, feeling the small warmth of her fingers in his. She seemed nervous, clutching her favorite stuffed animal tightly and glancing around the room with wide eyes. Daniel knelt beside her and whispered, "It's okay. No matter what happens, I'm here with you." She nodded, her small head resting briefly against his shoulder. Then the door opened. A woman stepped inside. She moved cautiously, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on the girl. Her face was lined with years of worry and exhaustion, but there was also a light in her eyes, a recognition, a spark of hope. She approached slowly, unsure if the child would respond, unsure if the years apart had created an unbridgeable gap. The girl froze. Her small body tensed, and Daniel tightened his grip on her hand, offering silent reassurance. The woman knelt to be at the child's level, speaking softly in words that carried a familiar rhythm, words from her own language.
"It's me, little one."
"It's me, your mother." For a moment the child did not move. Then slowly she raised her eyes, and recognition flickered across her face. She looked at the woman, her mother, for the first time in years. Her lips trembled, and tears welled in her eyes. Daniel felt a lump in his throat as he watched the reunion unfold, understanding that this moment was more than he could ever have imagined, both beautiful and heartbreaking. The mother reached out gently, and the girl hesitated.
Daniel whispered, "It's okay, you can go if you want."
The girl took a cautious step forward, then another, and finally allowed herself to be enveloped in her mother's arms. The room was silent, except for quiet sobs and whispered words of comfort. Daniel stood a few steps back, watching. His heart ached with a mix of pride, sadness, and relief. He had loved this child as his own, but now he realized that love could expand. It could include the mother who had never given up, who had searched through hardship and pain to find her daughter again. And he understood that this meeting was not about taking him away, but about bringing together pieces of a life that had been fractured for too long. For the next few hours, the three of them sat together, talking slowly and carefully. The mother shared stories of the time she had spent searching, the challenges she had faced, and the hope she had clung to. The girl asked questions too, soft, curious, and sometimes hesitant. Daniel answered when asked, offering his perspective and support, but he made sure to step back and let the mother take her rightful place in the child's life. The process was delicate, full of emotions, and sometimes overwhelming, but it was also filled with moments of connection, recognition, and love. Over the next few days, meetings continued. Daniel noticed the child growing more comfortable with her mother, though she still clung to him in quiet ways, as if needing reassurance that the world had not changed entirely. The mother showed patience, allowing the child to adjust at her own pace, never forcing her to act or speak in ways she wasn't ready. Daniel admired her strength and dedication, realizing that the child was now surrounded by two people who loved her deeply, each in their own way. Breaths. Daniel also began to reflect on his own feelings. He realized that fear had been the dominant emotion at first, the fear of losing the child he had grown to love, the fear that she would no longer need him. But as he watched the mother care for her, as he saw the joy in the child's eyes when she responded to her mother's words and gestures, he understood that love was not a limited resource. He could continue to be an important part of her life, even as her mother returned. In fact, his presence could strengthen the bond between them, offering a safe and nurturing environment for her to grow. The community center meetings gradually expanded into visits outside, in parks and quiet spaces near their home. The child would hold both their hands, sometimes switching between Daniel and her mother, sometimes choosing one over the other. Each day brought small victories, moments when she laughed freely, moments when she shared a story from her past, moments when she simply felt safe and loved. Daniel began to feel a sense of relief. The child was not being taken from him. She was gaining something even more important, a fuller sense of family. One evening, Daniel sat with the child in her bedroom after a long day of outdoor visits. She had a thoughtful expression, her eyes fixed on a small picture they had drawn together months ago. "Will we always be together?" she asked quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes," he said softly. "Breathe. We will always be together. You have me, and you have your mother. Bill. And we will figure out everything together." She nodded, her small hand squeezing his in reassurance. The mother also began to show gratitude toward Daniel. She recognized that he had cared for her daughter during years of separation, providing love, safety, and stability. She thanked him for never giving up on her child and for respecting her heritage. Daniel felt warmth in his chest. Though the situation had begun with uncertainty and fear, it was slowly becoming a story of cooperation, trust, and mutual respect. As the days passed, they began to share routines together. The mother joined in meals, helped with homework, and participated in small adventures in the desert. Daniel observed the interactions carefully, offering guidance when needed but allowing the child and her mother to strengthen their bond. He realized that this was a new chapter, one that required flexibility, patience, and humility, but also one that was full of hope, love, and possibility. Through it all, the child's personality blossomed. She became more confident, more expressive, and more joyful. She shared her thoughts, fears, and dreams openly, knowing that both Daniel and her mother would listen and support her. The girl began to understand that her world had expanded, that she could hold multiple relationships, and that love could come in many forms without being diminished. One day, Daniel and the mother sat together while the child played nearby. They spoke quietly about the future, about school, traditions, and the possibility of adoption. The mother expressed her desire to be part of the child's life in a meaningful way, while also recognizing Daniel's role as a father figure. Daniel listened, understanding that this conversation was not about taking sides, but about creating a balanced, supportive environment for the child. They agreed to work together, placing the child's needs and happiness above all else. The reunion also brought unexpected lessons for Daniel. He learned about forgiveness, compassion, and the importance of letting go of control. He realized that his love for the child did not have to compete with her mother's love. Instead, it could complement it. He saw how two adults, both dedicated to the child, could create a strong foundation of security, care, and guidance. The realization gave him a sense of peace he had not felt in years. Evenings became times of shared stories and laughter. The three of them would sit by the window, watching the sun set over the hills, talking about dreams, fears, and hopes. The child would sometimes lean between them, her hands resting on both Daniel and her mother, a small gesture of trust and connection. These moments were precious, filled with quiet joy and deep emotional significance. Daniel realized that family could be more than a single parent or a single home. It could be a network of love, patience, and understanding. Through every meeting, every shared experience, and every quiet moment, Daniel learned that love was expansive. It could include the mother, the child, and himself without diminishing any part of it. But instead, he found growth, connection, and a sense of fulfillment that was deeper than he had ever known. Bang! And as the desert sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Daniel understood that life had brought him an unexpected gift, a chance to witness the reunion of a mother and daughter, to participate in their healing, and to continue being a father in the life of a child who had already transformed his world forever. Life after the reunion was different, but in a quiet, gentle way. It was also full of hope. Daniel had learned that love could expand, and the girl had begun to understand that family could include more than one person. Her mother, Lila, gradually became a steady presence in their daily lives. The early awkwardness between them slowly transformed into trust, respect, and the beginning of a bond that had been delayed by years of hardship. At first, mornings were the most challenging. The child, now older and more aware of her surroundings, sometimes struggled with divided attention. She wanted to be with her mother, yet she did not want to leave Daniel's side. Daniel and Lila would quietly negotiate, letting the child make small choices. Breaths. Sometimes she would walk to school holding Daniel's hand, sometimes Lila's, and occasionally she would take both. Each small victory felt like progress, like the rebuilding of a bridge that had been broken for years. They established new routines together. Sunday mornings became a time for shared breakfast. Daniel would cook simple meals he had learned she liked, while Lila added touches from her traditional recipes. Sometimes they baked bread together, letting the child mix ingredients and shape dough with her small hands. The kitchen was filled with laughter, occasional messes, and an unmistakable sense of warmth. Over time, the child learned to share stories with both adults, asking questions about the past, sharing her dreams for the future, and occasionally seeking comfort from both of them when she felt uncertain. School remained a central part of her life. Daniel continued to help her with homework, but now Lila joined in as well, sharing stories from her own childhood, helping with lessons, and providing encouragement. They noticed that the girl began to thrive academically and socially. Teachers commented on her growing confidence and kindness. She was learning not only facts and numbers, but also resilience, empathy, and the understanding that she had a strong support system around her. Rasp. Daniel found that his role was changing too. He was no longer the sole protector, the only person the child could rely on. Instead, he had become part of a team dedicated to her well-being. He learned to let go of control in small ways, allowing Lila to make decisions and lead in areas where she was most comfortable. He discovered that his love for the child did not diminish when shared. Instead, it strengthened, creating a foundation that included both him and her mother. One evening, the three of them sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted with shades of pink, gold, and purple. The child rested her head on Daniel's shoulder while holding her mother's hand. Lila spoke softly about the traditions of their people, the stories of their ancestors, and the values she wanted her daughter to carry forward.
Daniel listened, feeling a sense of humility and gratitude.
He realized that this was what family meant: support, respect, and the willingness to share love without expectation. Over time, the child began to embrace her identity fully. She learned the songs, dances, and stories her mother had hoped to share with her. Daniel encouraged this, attending community events, festivals, and cultural gatherings alongside them. He saw the joy on her face as she sang songs he could not fully understand but could appreciate for their rhythm and meaning. He realized that family was not just about living under one roof. It was about creating an environment where identity and culture could flourish alongside love and care.
The home they shared gradually adjusted to include all three of them.
Daniel made room in his home for Lila's belongings, small personal items and gifts for the child. They painted walls together, rearranged furniture, and created spaces where the child could play, study, and dream. Their home became a place of connection and growth, a place where laughter was encouraged, emotions were respected, and safety was guaranteed. Yet, not every day was easy.
Bryce!
The child sometimes struggled with feelings of guilt or confusion. She worried about upsetting either adult or feared that one of them might leave. Daniel and Lila addressed these moments with patience, holding her close, explaining that love was not a finite resource, and reassuring her that they were all committed to her happiness. Through these gentle lessons, the child learned that relationships could be flexible, forgiving, and deeply supportive. Daniel noticed changes in himself as well. He had learned empathy on a level he had never known, patience that tested his limits, and the joy of sharing love freely.
He realized that the years he had lived alone, while quiet and simple, had prepared him to be present in ways that mattered most.
He had learned to observe small gestures, listen deeply, and respond with care and understanding. Lila's presence reminded him that family could grow in unexpected ways, and that life could offer second chances if one was willing to embrace them. One memorable afternoon, they took the child to a nearby river. The water was clear and the air smelled of wildflowers and wet earth. Daniel and Lila showed her how to skip stones across the surface.
She laughed, her voice echoing against the rocks, and Daniel felt a deep sense of joy.
He watched as Lila held her hand, guiding her movements gently. Then the child ran to Daniel, grabbed his hand, and together they all skipped stones in laughter and shared happiness. That simple moment captured everything Daniel had learned. Love could be shared, joy could multiply, and family could exist beyond any traditional definition. Over time, Daniel and Lila began to discuss formalizing their family arrangement. They spoke about adoption, guardianship, and the legal steps necessary to ensure that the child's future was secure.
Lila expressed her desire to co-parent and to maintain her role as the child's mother, while Daniel shared his commitment to continue being a father figure.
They reached an agreement that was thoughtful, respectful, and focused entirely on the child's well-being. The process was long, filled with paperwork and hearings, but both Daniel and Lila approached it with determination and unity.
During this period, the child was aware of the discussions but not burdened by them. She understood in her own way that they were creating something permanent, something that would guarantee she always had people who loved her. The sense of security this gave her was evident in her behavior. She began taking more initiative in her studies, exploring new hobbies and building stronger friendships at school.
She was learning that stability and love were possible, even after years of uncertainty. As the months went on, the bond between Daniel the child and Lila deepened. They celebrated birthdays, holidays, and small achievements together. Daniel noticed the quiet pride Lila had in her daughter's accomplishments, and he felt the same pride swell within him. They began creating traditions of their own, rituals that combined their cultural heritage with shared experiences, weaving together the threads of identity, love, and trust. One evening, as they watched the desert sunset, the child asked, "Will we always be like this?" Daniel smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes," he said softly.
We are a family. Sometimes families are small, sometimes big. But what matters is that we care for each other. That's what makes us a family. Lila reached out and hugged both of them, her heart full.
"And that," she said, "is the family we choose together." Daniel realized then that family was more than just living together. It was trust, patience, shared joy, and support through hardship. It was learning to step back when needed and to step forward when necessary. It was the ability to let love expand and to embrace it without fear. His heart felt full in a way he had never imagined, knowing that the child had two people who loved her deeply, and that he had a place in her life that was permanent and meaningful. As the seasons changed, so did their lives. Winter brought quiet evenings by the fireplace where stories and songs were shared. Spring brought walks through blooming desert flowers. Summer brought adventures by the river, and fall brought festivals and celebrations of heritage. Every moment was a chance to grow, to learn, and to love. Daniel watched the child flourish, her laughter echoing through the hills, her curiosity unbound, and her spirit strong. Even in difficult moments when emotions ran high or the past seemed to resurface, Daniel and Lila worked together. They spoke openly about challenges, respected each other's perspectives, and focused on solutions rather than blame. Their cooperation set an example for the child, teaching her that family was not about perfection, but about commitment, resilience, and love.
Daniel often reflected on the journey that had brought them here.
Breaths. He thought about the day he had found the child by the roadside, scared, alone, and unsure of what to do. He remembered the nights of quiet worry, the days of homework and patience, and the months of slowly building trust. He realized that every step had been necessary to reach this point, a place of healing, growth, and shared love. The child, too, learned about resilience, trust, and the meaning of family. She understood that life could be difficult, but it could also be full of love and support. She learned that the people who cared for her were committed not just to her safety, but to her happiness, her identity, and her dreams. She began to see that family was not limited to biology alone, but to the people who chose to be present, who chose to love, and who chose to stay. Years later, when the adoption process was finally completed, the child officially became Daniel's daughter. The ceremony was simple but filled with meaning. Leela was there, holding her daughter's hand, and Daniel stood beside them, feeling a profound sense of completion. The child smiled, her eyes shining with trust and love, knowing that she had two people who would always care for her. Even after the legal steps were finished, their journey continued. Life remained a blend of challenges and joys, growth and learning. But the foundation had been set, a foundation built on love, patience, and respect pay. Daniel, the child, and Lila had created a family that was not defined by convention, but by choice, commitment, and shared experience. In the quiet moments, when the desert wind blew through the hills, and the sky turned shades of gold and pink, Daniel would often sit on the porch and watch them together. He saw laughter, trust, and connection. He saw a child who had survived hardship and now thrived. He saw a mother reunited with her daughter. And he saw himself as part of a family that had been built with care, patience, and love. He understood finally that this was what life had been leading him to all along. A chance to love, to protect, to guide, and to witness the power of family in its purest, most genuine form.